I love to talk to this guy. I get inspired and feel better about politics, even though it's disgusting and aggravating. I always feel like there's something that can be done. It's Jesse Ventura, the independent governor of Minnesota, and among other things, a big Hendrix fan. And we'll talk about that later. He's earned respect around the world because he's not afraid to get to the truth, even when it upsets the establishment. He's nonpartisan, no trouble questioning authority. Maybe that goes back to his 60 roots. And another new best-selling book out, They Killed Our President, 63 Reasons to Believe There Was a Conspiracy to Assassinate JFK. Jesse, great having you back on the Allan Handelman Show.
Thank you, Alan. Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So much is going on. You know, over the last month or so, I've wondered, in fact, pretty much all the time when things go on politically, I ask, wonder what Jesse would say. So if you don't mind, because I know you've been asked so much of this, but it is important.
Sure.
You look back, we went through the government shutdown. You know, look what the government's put us through. The American people are so aggravated and so frustrated. So I want some of your wisdom on that. Looking back, I know you blame both sides, but in this particular case, which side do you blame a little more, maybe?
The Republicans, without a doubt. They shut the government down over health care. Why do you shut the government down over any amendment to a bill? Bills should all stand alone. There shouldn't be amendments on bills. So we ought to clear that up and start operating with that as standard operating procedure. You don't put amendments. Let bills all be standalone. The health care bill already passed the Congress. The president signed it, and it passed the judgment of the Supreme Court. It's over. It's the law. They're sworn to uphold the law, so the Republicans aren't upholding the law. Now, if they want to change it, let them submit their own bill and do it according to the proper process to do that, not shut the government down to make a point. That's my point. You don't shut the government down to make a point, and they seem to think that's okay to do that. It creates us being vulnerable. It makes us look horrible in world standing throughout the world. It has no positive effect that I can see on my country.
And the arguments they use during this process, well, it's the president who won't speak to us. He won't negotiate. He'll negotiate with the Iranians, but he won't negotiate with us. That kind of logic just blows my mind.
Well, it's despicable that they would use shutting the government down as a tool, a political tool, because my previous book was called The Democrips and the Republicans. No more gangs of government.
Excellent book.
Thank you. Well, that's precisely how they're acting right now, like street gangs. They're they're worse. I apologize to the Crips and Bloods for using their name in vain. Mm-hmm. Do you want to know why they're worse? Because they affect each and every one of us throughout this country when they behave this way. They affect us all. Where the street gangs or the Hells Angels or things like that, they only affect people that are directly around them. They don't affect the whole nation.
Right.
These guys affect each and every one of us.
And if they really cared so much for the economy, why would they put the shutdown out and get the shutdown going and then cost us $24 billion extra? They don't say anything about that.
No, and here's what I love. They just raised the debt ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And what's the first story? We've given foreign aid to Pakistan.
Yeah.
So now, in other words, let me understand this. Pakistan gets the money, but we get the debt?
Yeah.
Now, if I ran for president and became the president, I'll work that in right here. Foreign aid would end. That's nothing but international bribery, which is the same as their elections here are nothing but bribery now. So bribery is the common thing, the common denominator by the Democratic and Republican government. You bribe the countries by sending them foreign aid, then they get on board with whatever you want to do. And so I would cut out all bribery or foreign aid because we're so far in debt. If you brought that to a street level, if these people ran their personal banks or their personal economy the way they've run the governments, they'd be homeless street people pushing carts on the corner.
Right.
Now, they'd be the equivalent of this. You're losing your house due to mortgage. You're 4 car payments behind, but Uncle Bob wants to borrow $500. Do you do it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what
Absolutely.
we're doing. We're so far in debt, yet we have money to give foreign aid to Pakistan.
They turn against us anyway.
It's nothing but, I said, bribery.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's legalized government bribery that for some reason's legal for them to do, but it's illegal for us to do.
People forget that the reason we're in this economic fix we're in right now is because the Iraq War and Afghanistan. We did the war. We actually engaged in the war without raising taxes to pay for it. So
exactly.
So that's why we're having the financial problems.
Yep, because they put it on the credit card.
Yep.
And now it's coming due. And we're stuck with it. And what are we doing with our money? We're sending it to Pakistan. And we get the debt. So we got to pay it off, and Pakistan gets the money. I have yet to figure that one out, and I only went to high school. So please excuse me. I guess you'll learn about that if you go to college.
Right. Well, here's another one I can't figure out, Jesse. Maybe, you used to do a talk show, but it's amazing to me that so many people in that 1% have got the middle class to vote against their better interests.
It truly is. I mean, when you look at our, let me read something
Sure.
to you from the back of my book, which I do a lot of editorializing in the last chapter, but I think this one's extremely important. Okay, there's absolutely no evidence to support the statement, we've all made it and heard it, that we're the greatest country in the world. Here's the reason why. We're 7th in literacy, we're 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, 4th in labor force, and 4th in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories, and wait till you hear what they are. Number 1, that we lead the world in, the number of adults, or I should say, the number of incarcerated citizens per capita. So we have the most people in jail. And
yes.
We're supposed to be home of the brave, land of the free.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, and here's one I love, the number of adults who believe angels are real.
Right.
And finally, in defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are our allies.
And the first thing you mentioned, as far as incarceration, we're talking about for probably mostly nonviolent, drug-related offenses.
Yeah. And we lead, well, see, the reason is you always hear this talk about privatize everything,
right.
Privatize it. Well, that isn't always good because then you also hear, make government run like a business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not so good either because, first of all, businesses and corporations are for profit. Government is to provide services. So it's apples and oranges, kind of. And second of all, when you turn it over to private sector like we've done for many of our prisons now, well, corporations are bottom line profit. They need at least 80% occupancy in which to turn a profit.
Wow.
So it's imperative for us to put people in prison so that the prison systems can turn profit.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the forfeiture laws because they get all these things and money for local police departments and vehicles because they have a little bit of an income. They don't want to stop that income.
Yeah, exactly. And they make profit. That's why the CIA smuggles drugs, because if they can create a bank account where they're not responsible to Congress, then they can do anything they want and they don't have to be held accountable because they're not getting their money from Congress.
We're talking to Jesse Ventura. We have a lot to cover, but his new book, we are going to speak a lot about. It's probably, it is, without a doubt, the best book I've ever read when it comes to the JFK case. Really interesting book. They Killed Our President, his latest book, and we'll be getting to that. And other best-selling books, Don't Start the Revolution Without Me, American Conspiracies, Lies, and More Dirty Lies that the government tells us, among others, including the Demo Crips and Republicans, the last one. I know you're against both parties, and you really are calling for a revolution. You've been doing that a long time. And now you have a petition at change.org/Jesse Ventura, which I signed last night, by the way.
Thank you.
Talk about the petition. Talk about your feelings behind this.
Well, the petition is just something to get people involved and let them know we're not happy. Part of the petition is we want them never to shut the government down again. The petition goes on and covers a lot of good things. I don't have it in front of me right now. I'm too busy doing the book thing.
Don't worry about it.
But you can fill them in on it. It's just common sense stuff.
Absolutely. Stuff we've talked about on the show many times.
Exactly. And now we're giving you the opportunity to sign the petition because they never react until there's masses of people. You know where I got a ray of hope? When they wanted to go to war with Syria. And I found out that the calls were 300 to 400 to 1 to these congressmen opposing it. That gave me a ray of hope that the American people are finally starting to wake up.
Yeah, me too. That was an interesting statistic. And also going back to the shutdown, with Congress's approval at 10%, that gave me a ray of hope too.
Well, isn't it pathetic, yet they'll all get reelected?
Yeah.
Why, they should all be fired. If you behave that way in the private sector, why would this get to the point of no return day? If you knew a government shutdown or your business shutdown was looming and you had a deadline, wouldn't you try to achieve it and get done 30 days ahead of the deadline?
No, my theory is that part of the Republican Party is being led by the talk show wing, the Rush Limbaugh, the Sean Hannitys, the Fox News. That's where they get their marching orders from, indirectly or directly. In essence, that's what they follow.
Well, the point being from me is that if you behave that way in the private sector, which is what Republicans claim to be,
right,
you'd be fired.
Yeah.
If you behaved in that manner at the private sector, you would be fired from your job. And that's what we should do. Every one of these elected congressmen and senators should be fired.
I think so, absolutely. And you know, going back to insurance, they have, as you've pointed out so clearly, they have 4 different choices of government-run health care. Yep. Why can't we have one of those?
Exactly. And look what's happened. Look what'll happen to our veterans. I'm a veteran now. Now that's government-run health care, correct?
Right.
Okay, guess what? I can't get it.
And the reason you can't get it?
I made too much money.
I see.
See, there's a line. You can only get government veterans health care after the wars if you're unsuccessful. If you've got, for lack of term, if you ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, well, then they'll let you go there. But if you go out and get a job and you earn, one of my best buddies was blue collar, worked his whole life, veteran. He retires and thinks, well, God, I'm going to go to the vet's hospital, get my prescription there, and it'll be cheaper. He applies, and they turned him down and told him, right back when your financials change.
Yeah.
So as a veteran, the only way you get veteran care after all these wars, you either have to be wounded, that'll get you care, or you have to be unsuccessful and have no money.
That's ironic, but that's the way it is. That's very interesting.
All us veterans that have been successful, I can't go to a veterans hospital.
I didn't realize it was to that extent.
Oh, yeah. And the money, and you should see how low it is. It ain't, if you own your own home, you're disqualified.
Jeez. That's ridiculous.
Because you have too much asset then.
That's ridiculous. So they're only looking for the poorest and the most needy of
or wounded.
Or wounded, yeah.
You know, they'll take care of you if you only got one leg. But anything else, be it psychological or anything like that, unless you can somehow finagle your way in, if you've got too much money, you ain't going to a vet hospital.
Well, let's use our imagination and hope someday this is true. But let's say you're the president of the United States.
Okay.
And you have a Congress that is doing what they did to President Obama. How would you handle them? What would you do?
Well, I already went through it. As governor of Minnesota, my last year in office, they both turned on me, got in bed together, and I like to laugh and say I'm the most powerful man in the nation because I can get the Dems in bed with the Republicans to oppose me, the common sense middle. That's what they did in Minnesota, and what happened was they overruled my budget. They submitted one of their own. They gambled with the people of Minnesota. They threw the dice on them that the economy would improve and save them. The opposite happened. The economy got worse, and the last budget we were $5 billion in deficit, all because of what they did to me 8 to 9 years ago. of not being fiscally responsible. So it shows what I've been preaching. These two parties put their party first, their money people second.
Right.
We, the people, might be third, but I'm giving the huge benefit of the doubt when I say that.
Yeah, they talk about loving the country and being patriots. They don't love the country.
Not a bit.
They love the people that maybe the voters who voted them in.
Well, they love their money people, the people that give them money, that participate in the bribery system.
Right. Yeah. So now my hope is the revolution does come, and we do see someday you running for president. That would be wonderful. I'd love to see that. And maybe do away with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And what would be a good replacement for the two-party system? Do you have an idea?
No party.
No party at all?
Turn them into political action committees. They could still exist. They could still endorse candidates like the teachers union does or the plumbers union does, whoever. Law enforcement, you can get their endorsement, but abolish political parties, make them political action committees, and the simplest thing we could do, take their names off the ballots.
Yes.
Why do we allow party names on a ballot? That's done for a reason. It's done so if you can be an ignorant voter. If you're conservative, you don't have to know the candidate. You look for the name Republican. If you're liberal, the same holds true. You look for the name Democrat. You don't have to know the candidate. If we would remove the party names from the ballot, then it would be imperative for you, the voter, to educate yourself on what John Smith stands for.
That's right. And I thought about that.
And then my final thing,
yes,
and I do this, it's being stolen, so I want to say it again so I get the credit. I think all presidential candidates should be required to wear NASCAR racing suits so that we as the general public will know who owns them.
That's a great point.
See, that way you'll know who owns the candidate. They'd all like... Barack Obama would have to have Goldman Sachs, right where Jimmy Johnson has Lowe's.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that way you'd know, okay, I now as a voter, I'm educated, I know who owns these candidates.
That's right. All these PACs, all these advertising campaigns.
Well, make them dress in NASCAR racing suits. That should be required.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. Now, this is because that's exactly right. You know where the money is coming from. Why should that be a secret? Why do they keep that a secret? Why is that allowed?
Because they make the rules.
Yeah, they make.
It's easy to play the game when you get to make the rules, and they're even allowed to change them at halftime.
Yeah.
To whatever suits them.
Mm-hmm.
Look what they did. The last time you heard a third candidate was Ross Perot in 92. Well, the reason is they cut a deal then and eliminated him in 96.
The one thing that they have now that they didn't have maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, they have their own media bubble. So Republicans, conservatives only get their news from Fox and, as I said, most of talk radio. And they don't believe anybody on the opposing side because they're liberal. So all that's a lie to them. So they got their own facts.
Yeah,
and
they control the media. Why like doing this book I'm doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
I can't get on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, or MSNBC.
Well, that's really weird because MSNBC seems to me they share a lot of the same views you do.
No, they don't. They're just a Democratic
version of Fox. Yeah,
they're still part of the two-party system. Albert Einstein said, "A foolish faith in authority is the enemy of the truth."
Mm-hmm.
And Albert Einstein was a pretty smart guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No,
and then, Jim, you want to hear what Jimi Hendrix said?
Well, it's funny you're getting to mention Hendrix. Yes, because I'm going to be talking to you about Hendrix.
Okay. Well, Jimi Hendrix said, when the power of love overtakes the love of power, then we'll have peace.
There you go. That's right.
And that's very profound.
What song was that in a particular?
When the power of love overtakes the love of power, then we'll have peace.
You know, you're right. Now, what song was that from? Was that just one of his writings?
No, that was just something he said.
Wow.
That was a quote from him.
This is one of your favorite songs from, as we opened up the show with Hey Joe. That's one of your favorite songs from Hendrix. And did I understand that you say that you actually got to see Hendrix in concert?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Fall of 1970, shortly before his demise. And I actually got to see Janis Joplin also. I was in the Navy out in San Diego, and for some reason they were finishing up their tours in San Diego. And so I was fortunate enough to see them both live, not the same night, but within a month or two of each other. And then a couple months later, they were both dead.
And they did all the hits like, Manic Depression and this.
Oh, yeah. Well, Hey Joe, I always relate to that because where's he going? He's going down to Mexico. What does Jesse Ventura do? He runs down to Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. And you saw Zeppelin, too. Since we're talking music here, I want to just spend a moment or two on that. Yeah, you saw Zeppelin, the original Zeppelin. Well, of course, Zeppelin
Twice,
broke up.
72 and 75.
Wow.
When they changed rock and roll, hitting it up till that point, when the Beatles would play or the Stones or anything, they'd play for 1 hour. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zeppelin changed it all. They came out when they first toured. They would play. They'd come on at 8 o'clock and they would finish at 11:15 with no warm-up band.
Wow, with no intermission.
Or nothing. The only intermission was when Bonham would do Moby Dick. On the drums.
So you really know your Hendrix. You know your Hendrix. You know,
I know
your
my
Zeppelin.
rock and roll.
You do know your rock and roll. What station did you listen to as a kid growing up?
Well, we had two little stations in Minnesota, WDGY and KDWB. And in fact, to follow wrestling, WDGY, one of their main disc jockeys was a guy named Gene Leader.
Yeah.
Who later became Gene Okerlund, the voice of the WWF.
Ah, interesting. So you that was top 40 radio, I believe.
Yeah.
So you started with top 40 radio, then I guess I imagine you went into AOR radio. You listened to.
Well, then I went into that. Then FM was considered like the outlaw radio.
Underground.
Underground. So I shifted. That's where you first heard Led Zeppelin.
Yep. That's
was
where
on
you're.
FM because
right.
Zeppelin didn't make songs to fit the AM mode.
I loved there was on the first Zeppelin album. There's a song called "How Many More Times."
Yep.
It's a 9-minute song. Man, that rocks. And later in the show, we're gonna play some of that stuff, some of your favorite stuff. Just another thing about broadcasting and radio and media. You did a talk show for a while. You had to give it up. I know you have another show coming up. I want you to talk about that, a new show. But my concern, I've been in rock and roll radio for many years, doing talk and doing rock, and also now doing talk radio in addition to rock radio. But my concern is I know I'm working around people who are giving false information on the air knowingly to support their party or their cause, and they have no concerns with this, and it's hurting the country, and yet the public, for the most part, says, well, if it's on the radio, it must be true. I'm hearing everybody talk about it. That's driving me crazy. How do we get control again?
Well, you maybe can't. It's to the point now you as an individual have to be able to decipher through all of the propaganda and really decide what you want to believe. I would tell people this. Remember when they had the tragic shooting at the school in Connecticut?
Oh, sure.
Well, for 8 hours, they told us that the mother of the shooter worked at the school.
Yeah.
Completely false.
That's right.
And yet they flew with it. See, the thing we have to do is get our media back to reporting the news and get them out of the entertainment industry.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's what's happened. The news has become entertainment. And it's now about ratings, points, and money making. In the old days, they used to write the news off and they'd make up for it in the entertainment division. Now, the downfall, believe it or not, was the show 60 Minutes. It's a tremendous show, but the problem is it showed the bean counters that you could make money with the news.
But the original 60 Minutes was hard-hitting, and they asked those tough questions in your face.
Well, do you know the latest 60 Minutes would not have St. John Hunt on with his father confessing to his involvement in the Kennedy murder?
No.
Oh, yeah. They were set to go with it, and then word came down from on high, and it was scrapped. Another one, Judith Ferry Baker, who was Oswald's, for lack of a better term, mistress in New Orleans. She lives in Sweden and has been in hiding. She's come back to fill in all the blanks, and the 60 Minutes thought she was going to be the breakthrough story of the year. Well, it got up to a certain level and the plug was pulled, and they wouldn't let Judith on either.
Well, this is a great time to really get into the heart of this new book. This book really gets to the point. They killed our president, 63 reasons to believe there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. And you got new information. I don't know if this came from your TV show, Conspiracies with Jesse Ventura. Was this part of information you got? Maybe that started the ball rolling for the book. But talk about this new information and why you got involved.
Well, there's always new information that comes to light because there's so many government documents that are hidden from us, and to sift through the millions of them requires diligence of people like Harold Weisberg, who isn't around anymore. Harold passed away. And yet Harold brought lawsuits of freedom of information to get this stuff out into the public domain so that we could know what really goes on. And so it happens all the time. I like to say the Kennedy murder is very much like Harry Potter books.
How's that?
A new one comes out with more information every couple of years, and when you read it, you get review, but you always get one or two new things that have come to light. Like what we've done in this book that I find great. At the end of certain paragraphs where we talk about a subject, we will show you where you can go on the internet to view that subject or hear it yourself.
That's right. You have a link you put out, a YouTube video that just came out. Yeah,
and there's video of when the president arrived at Love Field, standard operating procedure, the Secret Service supposed to ride on his bumper. You can see the video of the Secret Service man getting on the bumper and then being ordered off by his superior, and he turns around with his arms out wide, palms to the sky, and you can imagine he's saying, "What in the hell's going on here?"
What's going on, yeah.
Because he was ordered off the vehicle. And we named the person who ordered him off.
Talk to the extent that Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon, George H.W. Bush, Johnson was involved. I know another book came out with your publisher, I believe, that says Lyndon Johnson was the one responsible, right on the cover.
Yep.
So talk about that.
Well, whenever you look at a homicide or a murder like that, you look initially on any investigation who had the most to gain. And Lyndon Johnson clearly did. He became the president. He was also at that time involved in two major controversies, heavy, the Billy Saul Estes and Bobby Baker. He was neck deep in these scandals. Word had it Kennedy was going to drop him from the ticket in '64. And Johnson's political career would have been over because he very well could have gone to jail. Well, amazingly, when he became president, the Baker scandal and the Saul Estes scandal magically disappeared.
See, I was so young then, but I remember,
Well, they did. You can look them up.
No, I remember my view of Johnson. Of course, I was so against the Vietnam War, and I blamed Johnson for a lot of that.
Well, that was another reason. The military-industrial complex wanted to go to war in Cuba. Kennedy wouldn't do it. They wanted Vietnam. He wasn't going to go there either. He had ordered our first guys out. Well, when he died, Johnson immediately reversed that order and sent more guys in. Had Kennedy lived, there wouldn't have been a Vietnam War.
Man, that's the way I understand it. And this talk about the strange murders or disappearances. I guess they were deaths. I guess you have to say deaths. Marilyn Monroe and some of these other folks.
Dorothy Kilgallen's a good one.
Well, yeah, talk about that.
We cover her in the book. She was a nationally syndicated, well-known reporter who never agreed with the Warren Commission. She was granted the only interview with Jack Ruby. When she came out of that interview, she said publicly, "I'm going to break the Kennedy case wide open." 1 week later, she died of an alleged suicide in her apartment in Manhattan. And all of her notes from Ruby disappeared.
Wow.
And it even gets better than that. Dorothy was so smart, she made a copy of those notes and gave it to her best friend. Well, apparently somebody knew about it because weeks later, her best friend died mysteriously and all the notes again disappeared.
Jeez. So who's protecting people today? Is it still the same culprits? Are they still alive?
Again, most of them are dead, but what they don't want is this. A coup d'etat took place in America that day, and no one was willing to admit it. We're in denial. And a coup d'etat is an overthrow of your government in a different direction. Well, it wasn't done at the ballot box. It was done with a bullet to the brain. And they don't want to admit that. And in any coup d'etat, you have to have a patsy or a fall guy to blame, and there can never be a trial. Well, that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a trial. And get this, I'll give you a personal thing on me. My mother, for some reason, she died in 1995, but when she died, she had one of those big chest things with stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
My son and I went through it. He was about 14, and in the bottom, she kept every Minneapolis paper from that weekend. I don't know why. We were going through the paper, and it was Minneapolis's Monday morning edition, which there weren't computers then, so that means the story had to go out early Sunday afternoon, or late Sunday afternoon at the latest, to make the Monday morning Minneapolis early edition. Subtitle headline, Monday morning, Dallas police declare case closed.
Wow.
Now, my 14-year-old son looked at me when he read this. You know what his response was at 14?
No.
He looked at me and says, gee, Dad, they spend more time on a domestic.
Yeah. That says it all.
The murder of the president, and the Dallas police declared it closed.
Case closed.
Monday morning.
Right.
No one confessed. No one put that gun in Oswald's hand. No one saw him shoot. How the hell could they close the case Monday morning?
It reminds me, it's a totally different case, but how the government will change on a dime and have a conclusion immediately, like with the Roswell incident. They said it was a weather balloon. The day after, they said it was a UFO. Case closed. It's a weather balloon.
Well, they do that on everything. Always remember this. When the government comes out with the official story, they've properly named it because it's usually to protect officials.
Mm-hmm.
It's their story. And remember, the government story is nothing but a conspiracy theory, too. Usually, they say there wasn't a conspiracy in the case of Kennedy, but it's just their theory. They can't, but there was never a trial. I did Fox Business the other day with Tom Sullivan a week or so ago when I was in New York, and the lead-in was convicted killer Lee Harvey Oswald. When it came out to me, I said, Tom, there's your prime example. There was never a trial. Oswald was never convicted.
There you go.
And yet you, the media, have labeled him the convicted killer.
Right.
That's a lie. There was never a trial. You have to have a trial to convict someone.
It's amazing. That's right. It's just a foregone conclusion. And
just like the guys down in Guantanamo. Mm-hmm. Why do you think they won't try them? They'd lose. So they're just holding them till they die.
It sure looks that way.
Sure it is. If they had the goods on them, they'd put them up to trial.
Right. Yeah.
They couldn't convict nobody.
Now,
that's why they won't try any of them.
You mentioned in the book you went to visit Cuba when you were the governor, and you actually asked Castro.
Yep.
Were you involved in any way, and what did he say?
He vehemently denied it. He looked at me, and first thing he said was it was an inside job. Second thing he said, Oswald couldn't make the shots. You know that as well as I do. Then he looked at me and said, do I look insane to you? He said, if I would have killed Kennedy, my beloved Cuba would be wiped off the face of the earth. And I believe him.
Mm-hmm.
And he then told me that at the time of Kennedy's murder, well, right before it, he said he was close to the Soviets, and the Soviets had said you could talk to this man. And he said at the moment of the murder, Kennedy had sent a French reporter, Jean Daniel, and this is all true, I found out later, who had come to Castro and was preliminary setting up a meeting between the two of them. And Castro believed Kennedy was going to drop the embargo. And when news came Kennedy had been killed in Dallas,
right.
Jean Daniel reported that Castro looked straight at the ground for minutes, shook his head and went, this is bad, this is very bad.
Wow. Talk about, this is another interesting thing, and I think you did this on your TV show. There was a deathbed confession during the JFK episode.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, E. Howard Hunt of Watergate confessed to his son, St. John Hunt, both audio, visual, and written.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote it all out. He said it was called The Big Event. He named LBJ, Cord Meyer, David Sanchez Morales, who was a CIA top assassin who was actually there when they killed Che Guevara in Bolivia. And he named all the people. He said he was on the fringes. It was called the big event. Again, 60 Minutes was going to do it, and it got the plug pulled. So St. John came to me because he knew I wouldn't pull the plug on it. And I expected headlines across America the next day. I was so excited. I thought headlines would be Hunt admits to involvement in Kennedy slaying.
Yeah.
Not one word.
I know.
Not a word.
That always boggles my mind. I say, well, is it because they just don't want to promote his TV show? They think it'll make his TV show? I mean, I don't get it.
No, it's because somebody like Hunt could very well be involved. This guy was a cloak and dagger CIA operative. He was his entire life. And here he is confessing to knowing prior knowledge that it was going to happen. He said he didn't pull the trigger or nothing, but he knew what was in the wind.
Oh, I know that what you're saying is absolutely true. But in general, I noticed that when you would do something on a television show that was just amazing and provocative and incredible, you would think people would jump on it on various subjects. They would jump on it and say...
I did that. The show lasted 3 years. I was never once invited on to any show to talk about my show.
Well, you were on this show.
Well, no. I'm saying on TV.
I know, the mainstream media.
No,
right.
yeah. I was never invited on. Like normally, the Tonight Show or Letterman, if you've got a show out there, they'll have you on and talk about your show. Yeah,
it's a fear of anyone who discusses the paranormal or conspiracy theories with credibility. They have a fear because they're going to make them look like they're dealing with the fringe. I'm not sure, but that's my only theory.
And it's also that I believe they want to cover the truth. They don't want anything to come to light where there's been any type of misdeeds done.
Now, the TV show you referred to, it was 3 years. It was the top-rated show. Is it canceled officially over?
Yeah, they didn't renew it for a fourth year. We did 8 episodes for 3 years, and they played 23 out of the 24. The only one they wouldn't air was the one we did on TSA and Homeland Security.
We're talking to Jesse Ventura, and the TV show we're talking about was True TV's Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. His new book, which is out, and it's one of those books that if you're interested in the JFK case, this may be the best one yet. They killed our president. 63 reasons to believe there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. Also, his Facebook page, facebook.com/official Jesse Ventura. And go to change.org. He has a petition. I signed it last night. /Jesse Ventura. Change.org/Jesse Ventura. So the TV show is gone, but you got a new show. And I've heard people refer to this over the last month, but I don't have any of the details. Tell me about it.
Well, I'll be doing it on the internet. It's Aura.tv is doing it. They're the same company that owns Larry King now, or Larry's working for them also.
And repeat the website again.
It's Aura.tv.
Aura.tv, okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Again, but I'll be on the internet, and I'll be broadcasting you off the grid in Mexico into the United States so that I can continue to tell you the truth. Isn't that ironic? I got to leave the country and broadcast into East Berlin here. that's my hook, is that I'm because I cross the border every year, and our borders today look just like East Berlin. The only thing missing is the tanks, and I'm sure they're on their way.
And is this going to be a general talk show with call-ins, or are you going to have
No, it's going to be more me. Remember Paul Harvey?
Oh, yeah.
The rest of the story?
Absolutely.
Well, it's going to be more that on the internet, where I'll do a tirade on a particular subject, and we'll get about 4 or 5 of them a week that will be available, and those that want to subscribe and have it on the internet will. And, the internet's the new media. I mean, even an old dog like me can see it coming. And I wanted to be on board because my boss, it's his first venture into the U.S. telecommunication market, and I want to be on board with him like I was Vince McMahon when he went national with wrestling. My boss is Carlos Slim, and it's his first venture into the U.S. markets. And for those that don't know, allegedly he's the richest man in the world, even surpassing Bill Gates. and they say he's a wonderful guy.
Wow.
And it's his first venture into the U.S. telecommunications
Well,
market.
I wish him well on this. If it's your show, I'm for it. What's the name of the show? Is there a name yet?
I don't know what it's going to be officially. It'll be Me Off the Grid, because I'll be doing it off the grid via the satellite.
By the way, a lot of people like Jerry Seinfeld, who easily could get a TV deal, he decided to do his news show. He does it only on the internet.
Well, Larry King left CNN and is on the internet.
Yeah.
Glenn Beck left Fox and is on the internet.
Right.
So let's face it, the internet's the future.
Yeah, the internet is the future, and I think television and radio are in a bit of a revolution to catch up.
I think you're going to see television disappear within my lifetime, except for old curmudgeons like me that still watch it.
I still watch TV, but I mean, I'm very, very selective, and I don't really have time to absorb all the pop culture stuff I'd like to, but I still like TV, and I still like terrestrial radio, even though I listen to most of my radio probably online or on a tablet or something like that. I remember the days, let's go back a little bit to the fairness doctrine. I know that's a dirty word with a lot of my conservative friends. They hear that, they think of, it's liberals that want to get their word in. But to me, there was a time when talk radio was civil, and there was a lot of both sides, and it was interesting to hear both sides. It wasn't boring.
Well, there was a time that Congress was civil, too.
Yeah.
Let's include that in this. There was a time that Congress was civil. They're not anymore, allegedly. Although I still think they work for the same. People that vote and think that by changing party they're going to get change are sadly mistaken, and they should see it clearly now.
And going back to Jesse's idea, if you're just tuning in, he says when you go to vote, there shouldn't be anything labeled and somebody a Republican or a Democrat. It should be just the person, and you do the homework and find out what their views are and vote on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And break these gangs up that have a stranglehold. And if you don't believe me, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams all agreed with me.
I want you to run. I've talked about this. We did a show, and Ron Paul's a regular on my program, and we were hoping to get you guys together, and that didn't come about.
We could have if Ron would quit the Republicans.
Yeah, I wonder why
he wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't get that. I've asked him about that.
He was about as welcome with the Republicans as the red-headed stepchild that shows up the day they read the will.
I don't know. Maybe he's thinking back to the days when the Republican Party had a lot of civil people and moderate people and some liberals and some conservatives.
I don't know, but if he would have quit the Republican Party, I'd have been happy to run with him.
Would you consider something in the? I know you were fooling around a little bit with Howard Stern and.
Well, that's not fooling around. I need something like that to keep my integrity. Because when I ran for governor of Minnesota, I only accepted $50 and $100 donations from individual citizens.
Right.
I didn't take PAC money. I didn't take special interest money. So I need something powerful like Stern who can raise the money and keep my integrity. My 4 years in office in Minnesota, I never met with a lobbyist.
I know the lobbyists,
and that's what I have to keep to satisfy myself. And the only way I can do that is by someone powerful joining up with me, like Howard,
right?
To where we could and we could use his show. He's Sirius Radio, the FCC. When I ran for governor, I had to lose my job and go unemployed for 6 months.
Did you get the feeling he was serious? That Howard was serious considering this?
Yeah, he is.
Good.
I think he is. I hope he's not pulling my leg, but I've got to have someone like him in which to accomplish, because I won't fall into the trap of the bribery system they've created just to get elected.
Yeah, the whole idea of having lobbyists, it's something, just looking at it on paper, you got to say to yourself, well, this isn't fair. Whoever has the most money.
That's how we run our entire foreign policy, is with bribery. What do you think foreign aid is?
Yeah.
We give a country foreign aid so they'll back us on what we want to do. It's called bribery. In the private sector, if you do that, you go to jail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How come they can do it?
Yeah. So many of those questions, you ask these common sense questions nobody can answer, and you ask it point blank to one of these politicians, and they don't answer it. They just go to
they don't have an answer.
That's right.
They can't answer it. They're part of the system.
In fact, you notice all the politicians, they never answer the question anymore, especially on the Republican side. They just go right to a bullet point.
Yep.
And that's just somebody.
You want to hear what's even worse? When I traveled the country before, at the height of politics,
Right.
you would see the same identical ads done in every state. They would just change the name of the candidate.
Sure.
See, they all come from a central point, and then they ship it out to all the states. And all they do is the same message. All they do is change the name of the candidate depending on what state the message is being sent to.
Right.
But it's all choreographed from a central location. So you have no individualism in these two political parties. No one's a free thinker. They have to go along to get along, and they have to be part of the bribery system in which to succeed.
The voice you're hearing is Jesse Ventura, his latest book that we're talking about, among other things around the world, what's going on. The new book, They Killed Our President. Now, another one of the hot button issues in general, I'd like to get your take on. I happen to know your point of view. I totally agree with you. And I thank you for taking on or disagreeing with Alex Jones on this. And that is your feeling on using the term Redskins. I think it's interesting, and I think it's a very valid point. I'd like you to talk about that.
Well, to me, how can you have a slang, a racist name be okay when others aren't?
Yeah.
If you're going to use the term redskin, then you should be able to use the N-word. You should be able to use any of these other slurs because, come on. I laughed when they sent this kid from Philadelphia, the NFL, to sensitivity training because he used a bad word. They got him on tape. And then the very next story on TV, they're talking about RG3 in Washington. I did 3 years in the NFL, 2 with Tampa and 1 with Minnesota on the radio, and I made a conscious effort. I would only refer to Washington as Washington. Mm-hmm. Now, did I slip up? I hope not. I may have, but I hope I didn't. I tried not to because I find it offensive. You could not walk up to a Native American you didn't know on the street and refer and say, "Hey, Redskin."
Hell no.
You couldn't do that.
And no one would ever think of that, but they don't mind it when it's part of a tradition and part of the name of the team.
And why is that? Because John Wayne used it in the movie?
Probably.
There you go. I mean, the point of the matter is it is offensive. You could not have a team, say you had a team from San Francisco. Could you call them the Yellowskins and depict them as being Chinese?
No.
No. You couldn't have a black team and depict them in that manner. Why is it okay that we do it to the... And I saw a great photo where a Native American had on his back, "I'm a Cherokee, not a Redskin."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is lumping all these different tribes and nationalities, which there are a great many of them in that Native community. You're lumping them with one word.
That's right.
The word is called a redskin.
Yeah, and if put yourself in their shoes, how would you feel?
Yeah.
How would you feel?
How would you feel if you were lumped in and because you simply were a member of that race, you would be labeled.
Yeah.
Not as an individual, but you're labeled as a member of that race. And how could it be any more defamatory than Redskin?
Yeah. Again, when you made that point, it was so crystal clear, and I think Alex Jones was trying so hard to kind of blame Obama for coming out against using the term, and you defended it. He said, well, he has every right to. Why not?
Well, it's, you can't just blame Obama for everything wrong with the world.
Everything. Everything.
Excuse me, he inherited it all from George Bush.
Go over those details for people who are so naive they don't remember or just have a short memory.
I can tell you this, the economy, what you're seeing now in the economy is based on decisions 5 years ago.
That's right.
That's how long it takes. It's a huge, slow-moving machine. And so when Obama inherited in 2008 or whatever it was when he ran, when he inherited all the deficit, that was from decisions made by George Bush back in 03, 04, like going to war and not paying for it.
That's right. No taxes.
No taxes. So we go to war and we put it on the credit card. Well, now you're reaping the benefits of that.
Absolutely. And borrowing it from China, remember.
And you're blaming Obama for what Bush did. And remember, Bush had an all-Republican legislature, Congress, who rubber-stamped him.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, since they caused this economic downturn, why would we reelect them to do it again?
That requires analytical thinking that I think people just don't do anymore. They just go to the bullet point they remember they heard on the radio.
Well, they have a memory span of about 6 months tops.
Yeah.
And anything beyond that, they conveniently don't remember. You know, that Bush destroyed the economy. It was not Obama.
Nope.
And you're hearing this from an independent.
And he actually...
I have no dog in either fight.
That's right. And you made that very clear with books like Demo Crips and Republicans. No, yeah, you make that very clear. But there is a time you have to say one side is worse than the other. And this is one of those cases. And you're right. It amazes me. People think, well, since Obama is in office, the deficit's at an all-time high. Actually, it's going down.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, I remember stating to my wife at the 2008 election, I said to her, you know, I wouldn't want to be the next president for anything because you're going to get blamed for every misdeed George Bush did. And if you look at George Bush's history, that's all he did.
Yeah.
Every place he would work, it would leave in turmoil and a mess. And other people would have to come in and clean up after him.
That's why when people say, we may be rough on Obama, but look what you guys did, the Democrats and independents did, blaming Bush. Well, Bush actually did dumb stuff.
Well, he took us to war on the lies.
Yeah.
Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. There wasn't one Iraqi a part of the hijackers. They hadn't done a thing to us, yet we lied. The day after 9/11, it was testified Bush wanted Iraq.
Yeah.
Well, you know, again, it's always when you look at war is done so profiteers can make money. Read Smedley Butler's book, War is a Racket.
War is a Racket.
By Major General Smedley Butler. He wrote it about 100 years ago. War is a Racket. They don't like you to read that book because the war people can't criticize General Butler. You know why?
Why?
He won not one but 2 Congressional Medals of Honor.
Wow, that's
2
right.
of them.
You can't...
And he wrote the most anti-war book you'll ever read called War is a Racket. He stated in his book, I didn't fight for the people of America. I fought for the United Fruit Corporation. When they would go into Central and South America, if they didn't get cooperation, they'd send in the Marines to get it.
Well, wasn't that sort of like the wisdom of your father? He was a veteran, and he knew something was wrong with the Vietnam War, right?
My dad was against the Vietnam War. He had 8 bronze battle stars in World War II.
Really?
He was with the tank destroyers. He was everywhere. He's in North Africa, Normandy, Battle of the Bulge, Anzio, Berlin, you name it, he was there. My dad, I'd come home from school in the early 60s. My dad was opposed to the Vietnam War before the hippies were.
Wow. That's very cool. That's very cool.
And he said back then, my father, he goes, this war... This is about people making money. Because I'd tell him the standard thing I was being taught in school. We're there to stop the domino effect of communism,
That's
Dad.
right. That's right.
And my dad goes, that's the biggest bunch of bull. We're there because people are making money off it.
Yeah, he hit it on the head.
Well, he died in 91, but I tell people today he gets smarter every day.
Yeah, it's amazing, that wisdom. That really struck me when you talked about that. I'm going to play a clip from Ron Paul from one of my previous shows. This is a subject we've talked about many times, you and I, in the program, but it still deserves some attention. Here you go.
I think the drug war has been a total loss. And I've been campaigning against it for a long time and was able to win a congressional seat in the Bible Belt, very conservative area, arguing the case. So it's not like people won't accept an explanation. I've just recently introduced legislation, to allow medical marijuana to be used, which is just a small step. But up until 1937, all states had control over that, and marijuana was allowed to be smoked. And now there's very strong evidence that there's medical benefits from it. And so there's 2 issues here. Why should we deny these benefits if they're available? And why should we not allow freedom of choice? And why should we not allow the states to make these decisions? We allow them to deal with alcohol. We found out that prohibition of alcohol wasn't good. But just remember that just not that long ago, there was a faction in the country that said we shouldn't drink alcohol, but they knew they had to amend the Constitution for that type of regulation, and they found a failure. They had to repeal it. Today, they don't bother with the Constitution. They just come up with more laws, and the people don't say very much. But putting people in prison for nonviolent uses of drugs, I think they should be treated as sick people, if they're drug addicts.
It's a health issue.
Rather than criminals.
Jesse?
I couldn't concur more. I am completely in agreement with everything Congressman Paul said there. And let me just state quickly, because then I got to run. I got another call that I'll have to do.
Right.
Is this. Thank goodness, hip, hip, hooray for Colorado and the state of Washington both. January of this coming year, it becomes completely legal there. All the other states will follow suit the minute they see all the money that these two states are going to start generating. It's a whole new job-creating industry that's waiting to happen, and it'll create jobs and help our economy, and it'll help us because it's a renewable resource. Marijuana grows, I'll finish with this. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and Betsy Ross's flag are all made on marijuana.
That's right. Well, God bless you, man. We need you more than ever. It is Jesse Ventura.
Thanks, Alan. We'll do it again. I got to run.
All right. You have a great rest of the day, man. Bye-bye.